In this video, I'm going to tell you about my ideas for how to prioritize tasks and the work that you need to do. In thinking about prioritizing tasks, there are a number of key principles that we need to get under our belts before we look at the simple techniques. And the first of those key principles is to understand the difference between important and urgent. Important is all about what matters to you, what matters to your employer, to your organization, to your team, to your community, to your family, to your social group. What matters in terms of achieving the things that you or they want to achieve. Things that are important are things that either contribute to what matters, or, if you don't deal with them, will frustrate the ability to achieve what matters. Urgent is merely about time pressure. Things feel like they have a lot of priority when they are urgent, but if that urgency is all about something that doesn't matter, then does it deserve a high priority? Another way of thinking about importance is value contribution. What does a task or a piece of work contribute in terms of its impact or the value it creates in an organisation, in people's lives, or in your career or your family life? And this can be about another principle, the degree to which the task or the work aligns with goals that you hold, that your community holds, that your organisation holds. Those goals are the things that you're striving for. If a task or a piece of work aligns with those goals, then it must, therefore, take higher priority than something that doesn't align well to those goals. And fundamentally, anything that is conflicting with those goals is something you really don't want to be doing. The next principle is a lot more pragmatic, and that's about resource availability. You can only do the things that you have the resources, the time, the money, the equipment, the assets, the materials to do. The thing is, in pretty much any context I can imagine, there will always be a limitation on the resources, which mean that if you try to do everything that's important, you may run out of resources and therefore not achieve some of those things. And it may not be the most important things that get done properly. So where you have limitations on resources, you need to prioritise so that you use those resources to deliver the greatest value. And my final principle or way of thinking about prioritisation is consequences. What if you do? And what if you don't? What are the consequences of the choices you might make? Because if you're not thinking ahead to the different scenarios, you can't make an informed decision about where your priorities lie. The next thing to look at is the steps that we take in prioritising tasks or the work ahead of us. First, make sure you have a comprehensive list of all the tasks, all the jobs, all the activities that you need to do. Because if there's anything missing, then any prioritisation you do will be flawed. Next, assess the task value, however you want to allocate value. At its easiest, it might be something about assessing the importance and the urgency of each task. But you may also look at things like consequences, or consequences for different stakeholders. Then start to categorise the tasks into chunks, perhaps rank them, and we'll look at a number of tools that we can use to do that. This will give you a gross prioritisation, perhaps with high, medium and low prioritisations. Next, start to allocate time and resources to each of the tasks, starting with those in the highest categorisation. At the point where you run out of time or resources, then stop. Everything below that, of course, will be deferred to some other time. Once you have this, you can sort a final sequencing out based on fine judgments about priorities and perhaps dependencies and sequencing. Then move into a period of constant review and adjustment. If you do your prioritization once and then forget it until everything is done, then you will become an automaton that ignores changing circumstances. But circumstances can change a lot, and what was the right prioritization today might be the wrong prioritization tomorrow. And as you work through tasks, and in particular as you complete them, constantly evaluate the consequences of the choices you've made and feed that back into your review and evaluation. Next, let's look at 4 techniques we can use to conduct our prioritization. None of these is better than the others, and some of them can work very well together. So the order in which I present them is not a prioritized order. Often people start with the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule, which says that you get about 80% of the value by doing the top 20% of the tasks. So can you simply list all your tasks, put them into sequence, and then count down so that you've got the top fifth of the tasks and work on those? Often, when you've got a number of different projects or a number of different substantial activities, you can allocate value to each of them. Then you should find that about 80% of the value comes from about 20% of the tasks. So if you arrange them in value order, then you can start to prioritize. A very well-known technique is what's called the Eisenhower matrix, named after President, formerly General Eisenhower. Eisenhower observed that what is important is very different from what is merely urgent, and so gave the matrix its name. On the Eisenhower matrix, we plot 4 zones. Some things are both important and urgent, and if you've got anything that sits in that zone, it's got to be a top priority. Other things are important but not urgent, and this is the zone of maximum productivity. Because, of course, if you're doing things that are important but not urgent, you will find that very few important things ever become urgent, which means you're a lot less stressed and a lot more in control of your work. Some things are not important, but they are urgent. They've got to get done. The thing you've got to question is, how important is it that you do them at all? If you do decide to do them with the minimum amount of effort to get them done to the least acceptable standard. And then there are some tasks, sometimes called displacement activities or just a waste of time, which are neither important nor urgent. And the best thing you can do with those is just to cross them off your list. My next 2 are variants on one another, and the first is the simple ABC prioritization. A priority are those must-do tasks that you really have to get done. They are going to be top of your list. B tasks are less important. They're the tasks that you really ought to do, but the consequences of not doing them are not going to be as severe as your A tasks. And then there are C tasks. These ones are going to have very little consequence at all if you don't get them done. They're the ones you're going to make time for only if you have time left over, and if your work-life balance priorities give you a little bit more time to put into those tasks. And as I say, this is comparable to another variant, which is known as the Moscow approach. The Moscow approach, or the Moscow method, stands for must, should, could, won't. Some tasks are tasks that you must do. If you don't do them, there will be significant adverse consequences. If you do them, you will get significant benefits. Then there are the should-do tasks, which have significant but perhaps not overwhelming benefits, or put another way, if you don't do them, there will be significant problems, but not overwhelming problems. Then there are the could-do tasks. These are ones that do have a benefit, just not a lot of benefit, and they do have consequences if you don't do them, but you could probably tolerate those consequences if you needed to. Finally, there are the tasks that you won't do, because the effort it takes to do them is just not worth the benefit you'll get from actually accomplishing them. In all matters of time management and productivity, one of the things that can really help is building effective habits. And in the world of prioritization, if you can build good prioritization habits, then you will be more successful. The first habit to cultivate is a daily review. At the end of each working day, or perhaps at the start of the next working day, review the priorities for each of the things that you could potentially do with that day. Think carefully about how much they matter, and then schedule into your day those things that matter most. And the things that are most important and perhaps most difficult, schedule into the most productive parts of your day. With high importance tasks, and particularly with high urgency tasks, get in the habit of setting yourself deadlines or milestones. These can be highly motivating, but they also allow you to control your time. That said, don't be overambitious about how quickly you can do things. Most people think that they can do important things faster than they really can and still maintain a standard. So my tip is, instead of asking yourself how long will it take me to do it, look at one of your colleagues, someone whose performance is average at best, and ask yourself how long it would take them to do it. Allocate that amount of time, and if you really are better than they are, you'll have a bit of time in hand, which you can use for admin or lower priority tasks. Sometimes it can be very hard to prioritize big tasks because it's not clear where they fit. A good way to solve that problem is to get into the habit of taking each task and asking yourself, can you break it down into a number of subsidiary tasks? That way, the prioritization of those smaller tasks might be easier to evaluate. And sometimes you might decide to do one of those early on and then defer another till later. Whereas if it had been one big task, you'd have had to do it all earlier on. Finally, if the first habit to cultivate is a daily review, the most important habit is flexibility. Constantly look back at what you're achieving and what's in front of you, and be prepared to change your prioritization on a pinhead when events and situations demand a new look at your priorities. If you stick to old priorities when the context or situation changes, then you will very quickly start making mistakes. Finally, I'd like to end this video with some of the common mistakes that people tend to make, the pitfalls, if you like, of prioritization and how to avoid them. The first is failing to consult enough people. On your own, you may not have a clear enough view of how individual tasks fit into your team's or your organization's wider strategy and priority list. If you consult more people, you'll get more perspectives on how things fit together and the broader picture, which will enable a better prioritization. Second is procrastination. You know what your priorities are, and yet there are one or two tasks you just don't want to do, and so you bump them back down the list, even though you know they have a high priority. Roll up your sleeves. Tackle them first thing in the morning when your willpower is at its highest. Get them done, get them out of the way. The third prioritization mistake I often see is overcommitting, putting too many things in the top priority bracket and then failing to have the time or the resources or, frankly, the energy to get them all done, and then getting stressed about it. Have a realistic assessment of what you and your team are capable of achieving, and prioritize within that resource, time, and budget constraint. The next mistake can be ignoring smaller, lower priority tasks, which are nonetheless important. A lot of workplace admin falls into this. We ignore it, we put it off, and then it comes back to bite us in the backside. Set aside time each week to do all those little tasks. Clump them together and get them out of the way. Do them to the minimum standard that is acceptable, if you will, but do them. And last of all, forgetting the possibility of delegating some of your high priority tasks to other people who might either do them just as well as you or benefit from the development opportunity of learning how to do them as well as you do them. There are so many ways that we can get stuff done, but before we even start working on anything, we need to prioritize so that we put our time, our effort, our resources and our budget into the things that really matter. Please do give this video a like if you've enjoyed it or learned from it. I'll be making loads more great management courses videos for you, so please do subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any. I look forward to seeing you in the next one, and in the meantime, keep learning.